Let's shift over to the news, and I had to double check there while you guys were talking about 2 Point Campus just to make sure that since we started recording, we ourselves haven't been acquired by the Embracer Group, because they went fucking ham this week, gentlemen. So they acquired Tripwire Interactive, who made Killing Floor, Maneater, Rising Storm, Tuxedo Labs, who made Teardown, Singtrix, which is a vocal processing effects tech, the physical distributor Limited Run Games, and definitely most shockingly of all, the entire literary works and IPs therein of J.R.R. Tolkien. I think with the exception of the Silmarillion, because it specifically names Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, and Silmarillion I know is definitely one that the Tolkien estate has been like really precious about. I know they wouldn't let Peter Jackson have it. I remember reading a thing about that a few years ago. But this is wild, because like when I read the story first, I don't know about you guys, but I thought, oh, they've got like the video game license now for Lord of the Rings. That's what they've bought. Fucking no. It's everything. It's the entire license, like whatever. Video games, physical games. I think theme park rides were mentioned. An animated movie upcoming. The Amazon series that's about to launch, an upcoming EA mobile game. Fucking, what the fuck?
So I'm guessing we're not seeing any of these characters in multiverses anytime soon.
No, I guess not.
No. But that was actually the thing I got from this, because, you know, I don't give a shit about Lord of the Rings or anything like that, but just in terms of, like, what was the agreement?
Well, I do, Mark.
Yeah, I know. But I was, like, curious about, like, what the agreement between Warner Bros. And, like, the Middle-earth series was, whether it was just, like, these two games and then that's it, or if Warner Bros. Had more.
Yeah. It could be one of those. It could be one of those things where it's just like, look, we'll honor, you know, existing agreements. We're happy to, you know, because I think something that's been in the news a lot this week is people trying to figure out what the fuck the Embracer, like what is their strategy, just to own everything. And like maybe it's a thing where like they'll be happy if like if Warner Brothers are going to make another Middle-earth game and make lots of fucking money off it, maybe they'd be happy to sit back and collect payments for it. Like they might license that IP out for other things, because obviously it's Amazon are making the show, Embracer Group aren't. They're just going to sit back and collect the money on that. So who the fuck knows? I think it's a bit more straightforward with the actual game studios they've acquired and Limited Run Games. It's obviously like to beef out their portfolio of studios that are making stuff under their banner, and to give them like a company that does physical distribution, like special editions of stuff as their business. That all kind of makes sense for your standard like you know, hoovering up a video game studio's practice that we've seen before. The Lord of the Rings thing is a real curveball, Jack.
Yeah, I didn't know much about the Embracer Group, and then I like started doing some research, and it was like, okay, they own quite a few studios I've heard of. Like they're THQ Nordic is under them. They're trying to obtain Eidos Montreal and Square Enix Montreal.
Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, but like they are the company that were calling themselves THQ Nordic, aren't they? And they rebranded as Embracer Group, of which THQ Nordic is now a studio.
Yeah, and also
right
it's not quite a few studios, it's 120 studios.
Yeah.
That's quite a few studios.
850 franchises. Like, that is fucking obscene.
And not all of them added together are not worth what Lord of the Rings is, probably.
Yeah. They very much like operate in this space like you see those kind of predatory hedge funds working, right, Jack? Where it's just like buy up everything, increasing the portfolio is all we care about.
Yeah, and it's probably not. It's a depressing, horrible way of doing business, but it's probably not a bad idea.
But
really,
it's like, look, it's not exactly like they're the only ones in this game at the moment.
Do you know, like we're heading towards the ongoing thing people say on Twitter is that like within a few years, every form of media will be owned by one of 4 companies.
Pretty much.
Yeah, and I like at worst now maybe this is a 5th company. You know, everything will either be owned by like Disney, Amazon, Netflix, Apple, or the Embracer Group.
Yeah, or one of the American networks, whatever the case may be. Yeah, it's just where we are at the moment. Mergers left, right, and center. I listened to the Waypoint Radio had a guy on the week before last, I think, who was talking about the whole merger. Fuck, who is it? Was it Time Warner or
Discovery, Warner, HBO?
Yeah. Like, I'd really recommend going and listen to that on Waypoint Radio. Like, that did such a phenomenal kind of breakdown of like what is happening with that, why it's happening, and why it's that kind of constant, like, the thing you come back to where like all these people that have all of this money are actually just a bunch of clowns who have no fucking clue what they're doing, and it's incredibly frustrating.
Do you know, as 3 wrestling fans, 1 recovering, this just harkens back to like Time Warner. Do you know, the Time Warner merger that ultimately collapsed WCW? And that was like one of those classic massive mergers where it turned out everybody on both sides was a little bit incompetent and were just focused on the money. It will be interesting to see. Like, would think this
AOL kill Time Warner though. Yeah. Like, didn't they spend loads of money on AOL?
Yeah, it's the AOL Time Warner merger that was just like, Jesus, should not have been allowed to go ahead in hindsight. But we could spend a long time talking about that.
I bet there's a brilliant YouTube video out there that it just explains how terrible of a business decision it was for Time Warner to purchase AOL.
And hey, if you want more deep thoughts on how that all pans out, tune into Days of Thunder in about 5 years when we get to the 2001 when all that's happening in the background. It feels like, I don't know, Jack, what you think.
What, in general?
Yeah, in general. Like, you're an enigma of a man. But like on this, surely this kind of like aggressive hoovering up of IP's strategy isn't sustainable. Like, one, because like I can only imagine the amount of money it must have taken to secure the entirety of J.R.R. Tolkien's works, but also how much IP is left out there. Major IP that isn't already hoovered up by someone else. Yeah,
I mean, I guess people, whenever they try and generate things now, if it doesn't work immediately, they'll tend to just fuck it, let's just go buy something. I don't know, like a big company will just immediately invest in it. It's like ultimately why Disney kicked off the whole thing with Pixar, isn't it? It's like, well, Pixar's being the shit out of you with these animated movies, and they were like, fuck it, we're bigger than them, let's just buy them. And that kind of started off this whole insane, arms race of media companies buying media companies. Microsoft buying, they never really had, they had consoles and people used to make games for them, but they never had their own development, so they were like, let's buy studios.
They bought their first party studios.
Yeah, but the thing that people don't realize, I guess, or maybe they do realize and they're incredibly depressed by it, is that massive companies have got nothing but sickeningly rich over the last 5 to 10 years, especially during the pandemic. Like, if you had a lot of money during the pandemic, there's a lot of people that have made money out of it from various methods, which you probably will make you sick if you found out what they were and how they went about it. So there's always going to be these monoliths out there who are only ever going to get richer. When you have a big pile of money, it's basically a magnet for more money. Therefore, if you have the time or the money to invest in something as prestigious as Lord of the Rings, then yes, it is going to keep happening. But like you say,
do you know, like, if I had money to buy the IP for Lord of the Rings, I would.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit like, it's a bit like sort of noted sex offender Michael Jackson buying the Beatles songs. Like, you have these fantastic songs that you probably grew up listening to who were like in the cultural zeitgeist, and he's like, I've got enough money, I'm going to go buy these now, which was one of the good decisions he made, as in, opposed to all the awful ones. So like, that makes total sense. Like, if you're a fan of this, or you can go and get it. But like, these companies are just like, well, this is worth a lot of money, and somebody probably works up some numbers, and they're like, right, we will, if we buy this, we're out of profit for a while, but eventually we are going to turn a profit on this, and this IP is only going to grow more and more valuable, I suppose. Which means at some point, expect Lord of the Rings movie reboots after the Lord of the Rings series that we're going to have, and all of that jazz. I would say
we could do like a less depressing version of the Michael Jackson example you gave there, and talk about Prince taking the publishing rights to Morris Day and the Time.
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah, okay, but that's harsh. And also, Morris Day and the Time, or one of the most famous pop acts in the history of music.
No, I'm saying that like it's
unless you're Kevin Smith, no one cares about. Yeah,
Morris
but I'm
Day saying it's less depressing because it doesn't involve a sex offender. It just involves some banging tunes.
I think you're just trying to see how many weeks you can reference Prince on this show.
Well, I now want to make it my life's mission to mention Morris Day and the Time as many times as possible. So I think that's a harder feat.
The last thing I want to kind of talk about in regards to all of this is from the aspect of like, if you're an indie studio, like we're in this world now where, studios are getting hoovered up left, right and center. Like, what is your end goal here? Like, hey, you've got some incredible publishers out there. We were talking about Devolver earlier. With Cult of the Lamb, Annapurna, Thunderful, I think. Like, there's a couple of like big sort of indie publishers out there that are churning out like hit after hit from indie studios and stuff. But like, you have to imagine that if you are an indie studio of any notoriety, or you suddenly get like a sleep hit out of anywhere, you must have all of these fucking monoliths breathing down your neck, trying to kind of snatch you up. And it's like, it must be tough, because on one hand, hey, here's Microsoft that want to put like a big fucking dump truck of money in front of us, like we'd be silly not to take it. But on the flip side, you run into the issue of like, well, all that might happen is we just kind of get absorbed into whatever, and you end up with like a Vicarious Visions working on fucking whatever Blizzard Activision property, instead of giving us another like Tony Hawk's title, whatever the case may be. So it must be rough for them in some ways.
Do you know what it feels like? It feels like maybe we're coming to the unfortunate end of a cycle, where it feels like maybe the start of the 2000s, where all those mid-tier studios start being absorbed or collapsed. Like I
thought you were going to say we're coming to the end of a thing, like, and that is the fall of capitalism.
If only. The IPs are absorbed somewhere else. Like the Midways and the Acclaims and stuff caved in, like all their IP got hoovered up and stuff like that. So what I can see in the next few years is that like you said, if you're an independent and you get to like a certain level of success or scale of game, you're pretty much automatically getting hoovered up. So what I can see is the next few years of like the two types of games we get are massive backed by the monolith IP, or teeny tiny little indie games and very little in between. I can see that, us returning to that kind of atmosphere.
But with that said, there's the tools that are accessible now, like the types of games that can come out that you're absolutely stunned were made by a team of like 3 or 4 people. The kind of the bottom scale in terms of like that tiny stuff, there's actually a little bit more kind of wiggle room to work with now.
You're not going to get that kind of dark ages in between the collapse of Midway, Acclaim, etc., and the start of the indie boom. You're going to have the little games keep on churning along, because it's kind of the system has been so democratized by the advance of technology, which is good. It just means that the kind of like I think the ham sandwich award is what suffers the most, because we're not going to have those studios churning out that was a 7 out of 10 job as much anymore. But
by the way, when Mark was saying about you were surprised that like 1 or 2 people built this, I don't know why, but Jeff Bridges screaming Tony Stark built this in the cave just came into my head. With a box of scraps.
Obadiah Stane working for the Embracer Group, imagine.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it would make sense.
Yeah.
Does it make them less evil that they're Swedish and all these other companies are like largely American except Sony?
Let's go around to.
Dave didn't even want to think about that.
No, let's not piss off the country of Sweden. You know?
Yeah.
No. I'm saying it's better that they're Swedish. Like, I feel like Swedish people are less, like evil. That's just my take.
I mean, if
could be
ABBA
wrong.
and Zlatan are anything to go by.